So I've got a lot of people on, especially YouTube, some on Facebook, that are wanting to have a conversation with me, and pretty much kind of a debate, but, a conversation about some of the things that I've said about atheism, the video Atheism versus Life, the video Atheism is Crazy. And man, it's just, to me, a waste of time, and I want to tell you why in this video, and so you guys can see this. But the main thing is that we can't even agree on definitions.
That's true, we can't. But there is a reason for that. What is that reason? To find out, let's do this.
BionicDance!
Greetings, fellow space travelers. BionicDance here. Communication with debate opponents is often difficult. Whether honest mistakes or deliberate deception, the things we say are often taken in ways we don't intend. I'd like to minimize these miscommunications, and I think any reasonable, rational person would. Don't you?
When I go and I look at the definition, not Christian or faith-based websites, but when I see what scientists say and how they describe DNA, it is genetic code. It's not like genetic code. It is. It's not like genetic blueprint. It is a genetic blueprint. So I recommend to you, if you disagree with that, well, that's on you.
And this is exactly the kind of thing I mean. Because what something does and where it comes from are two entirely different issues. But theists will often take words like code or blueprint, look at the other things we mean using those words, and draw false conclusions about their origins. If human blueprints are created, they'll say, then anything else we call a blueprint must also be created. They'll use language to determine meaning, play semantic games in order to fit their narrative, and to Hades with what is meant. And that's awfully dishonest.
The other definition is accident. I can't believe that people are like, well, I don't believe that life came about by accident. Well, then I've got to actually go and find and copy and paste the definition to accident and send it to you guys. So it's just a waste of my time, right?
But have you stopped and thought why we might insist on redefining accident? There is a very good reason. Take a look at the definitions on dictionary.com. Sometimes an accident is fortuitous, sometimes it's detrimental, sometimes it's contingent upon something else, sometimes it's totally without plan or cause. These don't all mean the same thing. Which the heck one do you mean? Which one do I mean? Are we communicating or are we talking past each other? And do you think that's important? A lot of theists will say that if God didn't do it, then the universe is completely random, that it came about by accident. And if I tell you that the universe didn't come about by accident, I'm disputing that it's random. And I also don't think that the only alternative is deliberate action. If you're not prepared to hear my meaning, you're basically trying to hamstring my argument by insisting I say something I don't intend because of the words we're using. This is why we argue about definitions. And if you insist we stick to your narrow meaning, then give me another word that lets me actually say what I intend. Or admit you won't because it's advantageous to your argument.
Life is short, and I do believe that Jesus is the only person that can reconnect us to our Creator. First off, I'm trying to help people see that it's obvious that we have a Creator.
Which it's not. And even seemingly obvious things need to be proved. A lot of things that seemed obvious at first turned out to be complete bunk, like the shape of the Earth and that the sun moves across the sky. Unless you're a flat earther, you should be able to take my point. Are you a flat earther? God is no exception to the burden of proof. If you think the existence of such a creature is so obvious, why do religious people insist on faith instead of giving us ways to make faith unnecessary?
And then, I'll tell you why I think Jesus is that Creator. But I'm not going to waste my time arguing with people when there's other people out there who will be like, oh yeah, that makes complete sense.
So you're not going to argue with someone who doesn't already agree with you. If they don't instantly, right the heck away, decide your points are perfect, no discussion is possible. And you really don't see the problem here. Okay.
The other issue is materialism. You've got to understand that we are literally in two different existences. You seem to be the people that argue with me about atheism. They seem to be bound by materialism. They believe they are only For some of it, it seems like they think they're all that exists are three spatial dimensions, and we are just in completely different universes, because I believe there's other dimensions, and I've recommended people study quantum physics and the evidence for other dimensions.
I did a whole video on quantum physics, and I'm actually rather proud of it. But because science fiction has watered down the idea of other dimensions, people hear the term and get weird ideas about it. They seem to conflate it with the idea of parallel universes, like another dimension means frickin' Narnia or some crap. It doesn't.
And then, is it really hard to believe that there are beings in those other dimensions that we don't have physical access to?
See what I mean? Narnia or some crap. But okay, let's suppose he does mean parallel universes rather than other dimensions. If we're not allowed to change the term we're using, we have to change the definition. And to be fair, a parallel universe might exist and can only be reached by moving along a fourth spatial axis that isn't the three we know so well. And I guess you could make a legitimate case for calling that another dimension. But again, we have to discuss definitions to make sure we're talking about the same thing. That's why disputes about definitions are important. Communication. And let's suppose that this other dimension does exist, but as he said, we don't have physical access to it. And let's further grant the idea of beings living in this alternative universe. If we don't have physical access to them, how do they have physical access to us? Why wouldn't that go both ways? Even if they live in, say, the W, X, and Y planes while we live in X, Y, and Z, we should still have ways to mess about with each other. And how are they creating our universe? Why should anybody think that? All your work is still ahead of you, guy, but you're not going to discuss it because I haven't immediately jumped on your bandwagon and am instead challenging your ideas and expecting testable proof.
Right? And then, so if you've got DNA and you've got complex mechanisms in a cell that clearly point to a mind, a designer, and you've got quantum physics that points us to other dimensions, is it really that hard to believe that we have a creator or creators who are outside of our three spatial dimensions, especially when we see how fine-tuned this universe is?
Theists love to trot out this idea that the universe is fine-tuned because it furthers their narrative. There are a lot of problems here. First, that the distinction is not made between maximally and minimally biophilic universes, where life could be frequent or rare. Second, the assumption is made that only carbon-based life is possible, and that the kind of universe we have is the only one that can have life. Third, life adapted to the universe, not the other way round. There wasn't a bunch of life forms that needed a home, and so one was built specifically for them. Fourth, there are at least two ways that the universe we see could have naturalistic origins: the multiverse theory and top-down cosmology. Trying to argue that a fine-tuned universe is evidence for a god is ignorant at best, and is more likely to be cherry-picking evidence to support a presupposed conclusion.
So this is my rebuttal to that. I just want to say a huge thank you to atheists. I've got a friend of mine who he agree. I like it when we can boil down where we disagree, and I am just thankful for people who do agree and they do admit that they believe that life happened by accident. So thank you for those of you who are not trying to redefine terms. You are honest, and I appreciate that.
But again, I'm going to have to insist that accident either be defined in such a way that I'm saying what I actually think when I use it, or I'm going to insist that a word is agreed upon which will say what I actually think without a double-wide buttload of ambiguity. Because frankly, accident is a loaded term, and so are a lot of the other words that are used in these discussions, and I insist upon certain definitions specifically to avoid dishonest wordplay. Not my fault you don't prefer the definitions I do. I mean, take the word faith. I've had theists switch up definitions of that word, sometimes even mid-sentence, if it'll further their argument. If I have faith in a friend, it's because I've had long interactions with them. I know their patterns of behavior, and I can have confidence in them. But I don't have to have faith that they exist, specifically because I've had those interactions. By contrast, I'm told I need to have faith in God's existence despite not having direct evidence. Those definitions of faith are completely different, and yet I've had theists tell me that if I have faith in my friends, then I'm being hypocritical to not have faith in God's existence. That's a steaming pantload of dishonesty, and you have to know it. This is why we need to have a discussion about definitions before we even start any kind of discussion on the topic. Otherwise, we're just going to be arguing back and forth that we're each being dishonest. And I'm sick of having those arguments. Aren't you? Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think. I'd like to I'd like to... And to be fair, a parallel universe might exist and can only be reached by moving along a fornama. If human blueprints are created, they'll say, then anything else we call a blueprint. What am I making beer over here? Then anything else we call a not a... Say, then anything else we call a blueprint.
Even YouTubers need Ferraris. Please donate on Patreon.
Droids don't pull people's arms out of their sockets when their videos aren't rated. Bionic dances are known to do that.